Hello, good to be with you today. I'm going to invite you to pick up with me and turn to 2 Samuel chapter 5. As we began this, we're going to continue on in part 2. I'll briefly bring us up to speed on where we left off. And there's a lot of good news in this passage. There's a lot of things regarding blessings. It's wonderful to be in a season of blessing. But there's also a little bit of warnings as we're going to close out the passage. So, just to remind you of where we left off, that after this long season, all the tribes of Israel came to David at Hebron, and it had been a long time coming, but they were coming to fully make them king over all of Israel. The vast majority of the tribes of Israel had not been following David. They had been following Ishbosheth. But they now saw that he had let them down, and God was using, though it was an ugly time, he was using it for good, and they're now coming together. And they were acknowledging they were wrong. They were acknowledging that David was the true leader all along. And it's also interesting that David was so willing to accept them, and they struck a covenant together. And it was a beautiful thing. We went to the detailed passage in 1 Chronicle. We saw that it was literally over 340,000 people with all the tribes gathered and united and now coming in to make him king of all. And of course, our application is that we should make God the king of all of our life, and that we often hold parts back, but we need to all bring our whole body, our whole soul, everything in us to be united to serve God. Now, one other thing is we're now transitioning into our new beginning verses today. It says, now David was 30 years old when he began to reign. Now that was when he began to reign over Judah. And there he reigned a total of 40 years. Now, I want to remind you of something. We could go back and read the passage in 1 Samuel with the prophet Samuel, who anointed David when he was around 15 or 16 years old. And there were many, many, many paths that led to him being the king. And then there were many things going on over the last 7.5 years to now bring him to this point. We all have seasons of life. And maybe we could just flash our life back and say, oh, you worked here for so many years, you were married for so many years, you did this. So it's kind of flashing back and giving us a little commentary of the seasons of David's life. But he's going to reign a total of 40 years. And from this point on, he's going to have another 33 years to reign all of Israel. So, now that he's king of all, what is he going to do? Well, there had been an eternal city that Israel had not been able to capture. But it was a special city. It's a city that still exists today, and it's the city of Jerusalem. And it, for a long time, had been held by the Jebusites. And David had said, I'm going to lead my people into the land to take the city of Zion, the special city, the city of Jerusalem, from the Jebusites. Now, the enemy just mocked him. And just think about what this description, this phraseology means. So they kind of called it, you will not come in here. Even the blind and the lame will ward you off. Thinking David can't come in here. They had held that land for so long. Israel had never been able to catch it, to take over it. And they were basically mocking him. You can't even beat the blind and the lame. You're weak. Think of the sports teams or somebody else, and they're giving each other a lot of insults. And that's what they were basically just totally mocking David. And the enemy, it was called the accuser of the brethren. And we can be mocked. And one thing about David, with all of his faults, he was a man of great courage and great faith, even as he took on the giant, Goliath. He had faced so many battles in his life, and this was another one, and he had courage. So it says, nevertheless, David took the stronghold of Zion, and that is the city of David. And David said on that day, whoever would strike the Jebusites, let him get up the water shaft to attack the lame and the blind who are hated by David's soul. Therefore it is said, the blind and the lame shall not come into the house. And David lived in the stronghold, and he called it the city of David. And David built the city all around from the Millo inward. And David became greater and greater, for the Lord, the God of hosts, was with him. Now, he took that city, despite the mockery, despite the fact they had had it for a long time. But he said, God has called me, God has called us as a nation to have this city. And so let's think about why this city is so important. I visited there, and it is an amazing city. And it has a lot of history. It's had a lot of history in times past. It has history today. It will have history, I believe, going forward. We think about cities we might like to visit. We think about cities here in the United States, and some of them, like Boston or others, have a few hundred years of history, and that's pretty cool. Yet we're here talking about a city from the very beginning of time, really, from the beginning of the earth, the beginning of civilization. This has been an important city, and it's an amazing city. So one thing you ought to understand about it, as part of our passage today, is it's actually pretty easy to defend. That's one of the reasons the Jebusites thought, that it was going to be easy for them, because it sits up on an elevated, I don't want to necessarily say a mountain, but it's very, very elevated. So when people are coming up, they're kind of vulnerable trying to attack the city. But in terms of its place in Scripture, it's called Zion 152 times, and it's called the city of David 40 times in Scripture. The earliest history of it actually goes all the way back to Genesis 14. And remember, with Abraham, there was Melchizedek, who he acknowledged as the king of Salem, and we Bible scholars believe this is just referring to what is today known as Jerusalem. In terms of bringing things, back into the passage that we're looking at today from 2 Samuel, in Joshua 15:63, it says, "But the Jebusites, the inhabitants of Jerusalem, the people of Judah could not drive out. And so the Jebusites dwell with the people of Judah at Jerusalem to this day." Of course, that was back in Joshua, but that is also, nothing had changed from this time in Joshua to this part of the passage in 2 Samuel. That was also true for Ishbosheth and Israel. The Jebusites had continued to rule over that city for many hundreds of years. Now, it has always been, with the battles that we're reading about here in 2 Samuel and other battles back in Joshua and other times, but throughout history, it's been destroyed completely twice. And Jesus talked about it. Of course, when we read about many of the events of Jesus' life, including his crucifixion, they were in Jerusalem. And he said, there's not going to be a stone left upon another stone. It's going to be destroyed. And it was destroyed within a generation. It's been besieged 23 times. It's been captured or recaptured 44 times. It's been attacked 52 times. So we're talking about a city of great history, of great importance. And today, it is still a cup of trembling amongst the nations. It is a population of over 1 million people today. It is the majority Jewish, but there is a very significant amount of Muslims that are there as well. And they both, the nation of Israel and Palestine, they both claim their city as their capital. And when you're there, you see soldiers from both groups. And I will tell you, we're not done with Jerusalem. They've been important in times past. We think of our great cities, of New York and Los Angeles and, Cincinnati, whatever cities you want to think of. I really don't think they're going to be important in the end times, but I believe Jerusalem has been and will continue to be important. But at this point, God had called David to come and take it. And so he was enjoying great blessings. And he was even enjoying the favor of those around him. And it says, and Hiram, king of Tyre, sent messengers to David, and cedar trees, and carpenters, and masons, and they built David a house. And David knew that the Lord had established him king over Israel, and that he had exalted his kingdom for the sake of his people Israel. So what David is acknowledging, what he needs to acknowledge, and what we, by application, need to acknowledge in our life, is that it is the Lord who establishes our blessings. And it's for the sake, not just of ourselves. We do enjoy it. David was enjoying this, but he needs to remember it was for the sake of the people, that we're all blessed to be a blessing. But there are wonderful times and seasons when our life is going well, and we should count and be thankful for all of our blessings. But, and this is going to be the last part of the passage today, and we've seen several warnings as we've been studying the life of David. And we need to be careful. David is in a time of great blessings. We can enjoy times of blessings, but sometimes that's when we let our guard down or we take things for granted. We need to be careful that we don't choose indulgence or sin or doing wrong. Sometimes that happens. But during our time of blessings can often lead to problems if we're not careful. And it goes on. It's honest, and it says, and so David took more concubines and wives. He already had a whole lot. Remember how we had read about that several chapters back? It's getting to the point we can't keep track of them all or count them all. And so he came from Hebron, and more sons and daughters were born to David. And it goes on, and it gives us all their names. And again, this is just the additional names, and they don't even list the names of all the concubines and wives. We had the list of those earlier on. So it's just to give you a spoiler alert. This is going to lead to problems. And this is a continual weakness that David had. So let's think about application. Let's put it all together. One thing I think about is we all have seasons of life. And David has had many seasons already. He was anointed as a teenager. We've been studying his life since he was a kid. He waited patiently, 15 or so years, well over a decade, to initially be king. There were times in the wilderness, there were times of joy, there were times of weeping and sadness. There had been 7.5 years of battle, but now he's king of all the land. And certainly many noble, admirable traits. His courage. He was mocked, he was laughed. Well, the blind and the lame can beat you. They were sitting on top of the city. They had ruled it for hundreds of years, but he showed courage. He didn't let the mockery get to him. He didn't let fear get to him. He was always quick to call upon God. He was always quick to enter the battle. And so now he's living in favor. He's living with his people. Even those around him, the other kings, are sending masons and carpenters. They're building him palaces. It is a time of prosperity and peace and blessing. Countries at times have that. Individuals have that. We have that. But it's also a time, if you're in that time of blessing, wow, I'm so glad to hear it. I'm thankful for your time of blessing. But be careful in your time of blessing. Be humble. Be humble that it's God who's given you the blessing. And don't abuse it. Don't indulge in it. Be humble and receive your blessing. Keep your blessing. And remember, you're blessed to be a blessing.